Alright everyone, so today I wanted to get into the concept of not fully skill booking champions in order to achieve their maximum power level. This is going to be a bit more advanced, probably going to be a multi-part video series. This is going to be the first of those three where I really get into the details of the three different categories behind champions that you don't want to fully skill book. Now, before we really get into that, it's important to understand that skill books are not as simple as they might seem. As a newer player especially, you might think to yourself, well, if I use more skill books on a champion, it's quite simply going to get better. That is absolutely not going to be the case. Sure, it's a good generalization, and a lot of champions will get better by using more skill books on them, but there are definitely going to be certain points where champions will actually get worse when you use skill books on them. And a lot of this happens especially at points where skills gain cooldown reductions. Now, I don't really want to get too far ahead of myself, but just think to yourself that especially if you are newer, not every champion is going to quite simply get better by using more skill books on them. It's definitely a bit more complicated than you might think it is. Now, I know this might be a bit more simple for those of you guys who've been playing for a while, but I really want you to try to get a good understanding of this, and it'll make this whole video series and this whole concept a lot easier for you to understand. And what I mean is, first of all, when you take a look at a champion, look at what the main goal of that champion is going to be for whatever it is that they're doing. For the team that they're in, the formation, whether it's for the clan boss, dungeons, arena, what is that main goal of your champion going to be? And then further look at what is that champion going to be doing each turn individually in order to help with that main goal. Now, this whole concept of each turn and taking a look at what a champion is going to be doing each turn is really, really important when it comes to properly skill booking, because if you don't understand what your champion is going to be doing each and every turn, you're not really going to be able to get a good sense of what are going to be good turns for champions, what are going to be bad turns, and what skill books are going to do to change the way that your champions play out each and every turn that they get. So, now, with that being said, there are three different categories of not fully skill booking champions that you want to take a look at. And in this video today, I'm going to give one example of a champion from each of these categories. However, like I said, in the future, there will be more videos talking about this in more detail. And I'm probably going to go over each of these three categories individually in a separate video in the future and get into every champion that I can think of in those three separate categories when it comes to not fully skill booking. But number one is going to end up being champions that are not worth using skill books on, but they are still going to get better. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, skill books are a limited resource in Raid Shadow Legends, especially if you are not a big spender or if you're free to play. You don't really get them that often. They come from events, tournaments. We get them occasionally from handouts, but you don't really get a whole lot of them. And some champions are going to get way more benefit from skill books than other champions. And of course, if you have a champion that's going to get way stronger from a skill book compared to another champion that's still going to get stronger, but just not nearly as stronger as the other champion, you're probably going to want to use them on the champion that gets a lot stronger rather than the champion that doesn't get a lot stronger. Now, a really good example of this first category of not fully skill booking is going to be Septimus, who's going to be a legendary in the Bannerlords. Now, Septimus, right here, you'll see that he can end up acquiring a total of 8 skill books. So that's going to be 8 legendary skill books, and he has 2 skills that gain benefit. His first skill is going to be his auto attack. Behead attacks one enemy, grants an extra turn, and resets the cooldown on this champion's Holy Sword skill if the target is killed. Now, you could see from the grayed out text what each skill book is going to do for Septimus. So you have level 2, 5% damage, level 3, also 5% damage, level 4, another 5% damage, and of course, level 5, 10% damage. So yeah, extra damage is nice. It's always great to do more damage with their skills, especially on a champion where, of course, Septimus's major goal is going to be more damage DPS focused. However, that's all he ends up getting from those skill books. And legendary skill books are very rare, very hard to come by, especially free to play, low spenders. You don't really get a lot of them. So if a little bit of extra damage is the only thing that you are getting from skill books, then probably going to be other champions that are going to be worth using those skill books on instead. Now, his second skill, same thing as his auto attack. Attacks to an enemy will ignore shield and block damage buffs. Damage increases according to enemy max HP, and exactly the same skill books as his auto attack, Level 2, 3, and 4 are just 5% extra damage. Level 5 is 10% extra damage, but that's it. He has no increased buff debuff chance, no cooldown reduction, just raw damage. So that's 8 skill books for a little bit of extra damage on his auto attack and his second skill, but that is it. So with how rare legendaries are and how rare legendary skill books are, you're probably not going to want to use 8 legendary skill books for just a little bit of extra damage on Septimus. There's going to be way better skill book opportunities to use on legendaries. Even if you don't have one right now, in the future, save them up. Some champions get so much more powerful with skill books that they are going to be essentially a complete new champion after skill booking them versus before skill booking them. So that's going to end up being the first category right there. And like I said, in the future, there will be probably a whole separate video where I get into every single champion in this category right here, because there are definitely plenty of them, including lots of epics as well. Now, the second category is where things get a little bit more complicated, and that is going to be champions that are better not being fully skill booked. Now, these are going to be champions where they actually get weaker if you have maxed out their skill books completely. Now, that first category is not the case. Septimus still does get stronger by having him skill booked, but it's probably just not worth using those skill books. The second category now, you actually risk a champion getting weaker by not having them fully booked up. Now, the example that I always like to use for this, one of my favorite example champions to use for a lot of different stuff, is going to be Vrask. And he is going to end up being in the Orcs category right here. And it's going to be this guy. So Vrask is a support-based champion, and he's not really going to be a damage dealer. The main goal of Vrask is going to be to activate his cannibalism passive right here. Heals all allies by 10% of his max HP when he inflicts a critical hit. So of course, what you're going to want to do is to build around this passive. This is why those concepts of what is the main goal of your champion and what is my champion doing each turn, this is why they're so important to understand, because they're really going to allow you to get a much better understanding of properly skill booking champions. And Vrask is a great champion. He's not just a damage dealer, he's not just a regular support that has buffs, he's very specifically designed around this cannibalism passive. You're going to want to gear him to have a lot of critical hit, because if you don't critical hit, you're not going to activate his passive, and that takes away all of his usability right there. You're also going to want to build him with a lot of max HP, because that means that his heal is going to hit a lot stronger. He's not going to be a damage dealer. That's not his main goal, so you really don't need to skill book him. In fact, his auto attack is arguably going to be better than his second ability right here, because it has some added extra utility on top of it. Attacks to an enemy fills this champion's turn meter by 20% if this attack is critical. Now remember, you're also going to be building critical for his passive, so you should be getting critical hits on this skill as well, which means you're going to be filling up his turn meter. Now his second skill is just going to be attacks one enemy. That's it. It doesn't have that added extra utility of filling the turn meter. It has a 4-turn cooldown. However, if you fully skill book Vrask, it actually lowers the cooldown of the skill down to 3 turns, which means that you're going to be activating the lightning strike more frequently now in comparison to the auto attack. And because Vrask is such a unique support champion, his auto attack is actually going to end up being better by filling his turn meter than his second skill is. So quite simply, because of the way that Vrask works, he's not a damage dealer. This skill is not important. It's actually going to be worse than his auto attack. You're really not going to want to fully book him. In fact, I would say probably not going to be worth booking him at all, because he's not a damage dealer. There's no reason to get that extra 5% damage. No reason for this, and absolutely no reason to get that cooldown reduction, because that'll quite simply make him weaker. So again, there will be another video in the future that'll have more champions like that, but there is still one more category to talk about. This is going to be the most complicated one, definitely going to be the most advanced concept. And this is going to be champions that are worth gambling certain skills, hitting cooldown reduction or not hitting cooldown reduction in order to improve their main goals. And this is really going to be important for certain poisoning champions. Now, I know this one was a mouthful, and again, it's going to be an advanced concept, a whole separate video talking about this and getting into the, more in-depth details on this one alone. But there is one champion in specific who fits this description perfectly, and I want to talk about Occult Brawler. So if we go to the Ogre tribes, that's where he will be. And Occult Brawler is going to be a very strong, unique poisoning champion. He doesn't have a lot of skills, but you really need to understand that concept of what is the main goal of a champion and what is my champion going to be doing each turn to help with that goal, to understand why a Cult Brawler is probably not going to be worth fully skill booking. So going back to his skills, you have his first skill right here, attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. Now, you will see that skill books on this ability right here give a little bit of extra damage, but they also have the possibility of giving you buff and debuff chance, which is important because that buff debuff chance for poison, it's still going to be good, and it's definitely going to be more valuable than just the raw damage alone. But it's not until you look at his second skill and really tear it apart and kind of see what it does that you understand that it's probably not going to be worth fully booking and getting that cooldown reduction on this skill in order to make a Cult Brawler stronger. So you have Curse Eater, 4-turn cooldown, attacks one enemy. If this champion is under 1 or more debuffs, this attack ignores 30% of enemies' defense. If this champion is under 2 or more debuffs, enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived. If this champion is under 3 or more debuffs, this attack is always critical. If this champion is under 4 or more debuffs, this champion heals by 30% of the damage inflicted. If this champion is under 5 or more debuffs, grants an extra turn, removes all debuffs from this champion after the attack. So that is a mouthful right there. And now we have to take a look at his passive as well. Places a 2.5% poison debuff on this champion for 4 turns at the start of each turn. Has a 70% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff on a random enemy for 4 turns at the start of each turn. So a Cult Brawler poisons not only his enemies, but he poisons himself, which adds a debuff to him, and this ability is going to get stronger the more debuffs that he has. But the biggest strength to this ability right here is when he has 5 or more debuffs, which is going to give him an extra turn, which is huge in comparison to all the other benefits that he gets. The ignores defense, that's okay, but it's not amazing. Enemies cannot be revived, always critical. You're probably going to either not build critical or have 100% critical anyway. Heals by 30% of the damage. Those things are all, you know, they're still good, but the real insane part of this ability is that extra turn. And you need 5 debuffs in order to get that extra turn to begin with. So with a 4-turn cooldown, if you lower the cooldown, all you're doing is you're making it even more difficult in order to end up getting those 5 debuffs to grant that extra turn either way. Unless you know for a fact that your team formation in a way is somehow set up to the fact that you're 100% confident that you are going to be getting 5+ debuffs every 3 turns or less, then this champion is actually not going to be worth skill booking because it gives you an extra turn to rack up those debuffs to get that extra turn reduction. And additionally, when he ends up using this skill right here, if he doesn't get that extra turn, then he loses on that opportunity to place a poison debuff on his auto attack, because his auto attack places the poison debuff. His second ability does not place a poison debuff. So it is a bit of a gamble though, because on this skill right here, what you can actually try to do is it's a toss-up. He gets weaker by having the cooldown reduction on his Curse Eater skill, but he gets stronger if you can somehow manage to land on getting that buff debuff chance on his auto attack. So ideally what you would want to do is you would want to get this skill up to level 5 and get a little bit of extra damage and that buff debuff chance to increase the poison from 50% to 60%, but then you would want to make sure that this skill right here, Curse Eater, does not have it fully booked and only at the very most is ranked up to level 5. So as you guys could see, skill booking definitely gets a bit more complicated than you think it does. It's a bit more of an advanced concept, especially when you get into this third category right here. And this whole idea of gambling to try to get certain skills unlocked versus keeping other cooldowns not unlocked is really going to be big for a lot of champions with debuffs, specifically poisons. So I know this video was a mouthful, especially to those of you guys who are newer, but like I said, this will probably be a multi-part series. So if you guys are interested in more champions that get into these 3 different categories, then definitely keep an eye on the channel. But I threw a lot of information at you guys, so I'm going to end up leaving it off here for now. So if you guys did enjoy this video and you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing, especially if you're interested in those additional follow-ups. If you want to help out, tossing a quick like means more than you can imagine, and of course, more Raid Shadow Legends videos should be popping up right about now. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day, and until next time, this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.